Host.
Hello and welcome to Public Report. I'm your host, Rhonda Webb, and today's program is one that I am encouraging you to really dig in and be aware, very aware of the topic that we'll be sharing. It's rather serious, and it's one that we really need to address on a somewhat regular basis. So having said that, I'm happy to have with me on today's program Barb Smith, and she is the Executive Director with Suicide Resource and Response Network. So Barb, I'd like to welcome you to Public Report.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as I've already shared with our viewers, the topic that we're discussing is relatively serious, and it's definitely one that needs to be discussed on an ongoing basis. So as the Executive Director of Suicide Resource and Response Network, can you, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you become involved with this organization?
It's kind of a unique program, right?
Yeah.
So my brother took his life when he was 20, and then more recently my sister-in-law had taken her life. So that really started us on the journey of making change so that no other family has to go through with what we've been through. So I just started doing some studies and research and looking at what we could do to help people bereaved by suicide as well as prevent future deaths.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the effect of suicide on a national level? What have you seen over the years?
Yeah, it's sort of increasing in some areas. We're about 45,000 people die by suicide a year nationally, and 1,400 here in Michigan. In the Great Lakes Bay region, we have anywhere from 55 to 58 people that lose their life to suicide. But we're really changing a lot of what can we do to help prevent. So we're also finding a lot of people are reaching out and getting help because we're talking about it more openly.
Okay, so you would say that that's really the key to work on the side of preventing it by keeping it as an active conversation.
Oh, correct. Yes.
Okay.
You know, we can't. I believe that we can't change it unless we address it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's important that we help people bereaved by suicide, but it's equally as important that we bring awareness and education to prevent.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about the stigma. So, first of all, is there a stigma associated with suicide?
Yeah, there's definitely a stigma. Mental illness is a factor in between 90 and 95% of suicide. And we have the stigma with mental illness where we think people are crazy or weak. You know, they need to just get well, they need to just exercise, they just need to be happy. Well, there are some things that they can do, but oftentimes there is a stigma to the mental illness part, so people are not getting the help. They're not talking about their depression. They're not getting treated for it. So when that happens, oftentimes suicide can be the result, is if we're not getting the right help. So the stigma is really about if we have thoughts of suicide and we feel ashamed or we don't want to tell anyone, that thought stays in our head.
Okay.
So when someone has thoughts, we really encourage them to find someone safe that they can talk to it about and to reach out and get help.
Okay. In the process of even preparing for today's program, I was reminded of an individual that I encountered many years ago, a young lady that I didn't have a personal relationship with. It was more a business relationship. And ultimately, at the age of 16, she committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And as I think back, this was a young lady, obviously still in high school, but she bore the weight of her family's issues. She was the go-to person, even though she was a teenager.
Yes.
But there was just so much that was expected of her to help solve other people's problems, mm-hmm. adults even. And it was a shock when she ended her life by suicide. So what do we look for? What are the signs? How often is it that a person just comes out and says, I'm thinking about ending my life?
Actually, 80 to 90% of people will tell someone in some way or another that they're having thoughts of suicide. but oftentimes we don't hear it that way because it's not clearly stated. It might show in their behavior. So someone who is maybe increasing alcohol or substance drugs, possibly change in sleeping would be a warning sign where they're sleeping all the time or they can't sleep. Anxiety, anger, maybe they're change in eating, so they may lose a lot of weight. Performance in job, because it can be very difficult to concentrate. So suicide warning signs can come in different ways for different people.
Okay.
So what we encourage others and family members to realize is it's really the change of behavior for that person. So it's very individual. So if I generally can't sleep, like I'm often 2-3 hours of sleep, and all of a sudden I'm sleeping all the time, that would be different for me than if you are naturally a sleeper.
Right.
You sleep your 8 to 10 hours, and now it's like you can't sleep. So we don't want to stereotype people specifically to suicide, but we want people to know that if it's a change of behavior for someone, if they anyway, anyhow allude to wanting to die, or they can't take it anymore, or life is just too hard, for us to just gently say, you know, when you say those things, and I've noticed that you've lost weight, I know that you've been drinking more and that's unusual for you, and then when you said you can't take it anymore, I'm going to ask you and check in to see if you've also had thoughts of suicide. So when someone makes a statement or behavior that makes you concerned, do you use all those concerns to lead into the question of suicide or ending life?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe warning signs are helpful, but we also want people to know, as in this young person you talked about, is she was the one that helped everyone else. She seemed to have it all together. She was smart. She was beautiful. She doesn't fit that stereotype, right, of somebody walking around mopey and depressed. But maybe in conversations when she, and not to say that you missed something, but in conversations about how hard it was to be 16 and to carry the weight of her family, you know, maybe you were that person she was giving these little signs to. And when you are the person who's used to being the helper, it's also really difficult to ask for help for yourself.
Okay.
When you are the fix-it person, it's really difficult to be asking someone else to help you. Does that make sense?
It does,
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
I understand completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously, I know that you want to be able to reach young people,
Yes.
in particular. Are there any hindrances for you to be able to get that message out? Because I would almost think that in some instances, what you want to bring to the public is sometimes so uncomfortable that you're not given the opportunity to share it.
Yeah.
Almost as if people think, well, if we talk about this, then it's going to happen. We're going to see that occur as a result of the topic being brought up. So how do you counteract that?
Well, there's a lot of research that backs that up, and I really appreciate that question because that is a myth, that talking about it does not make it happen, but it empowers people and encourages them to get the help that they need. So we do a program called Yellow Ribbon in our schools, and that's based on the youth, middle school, high school. And in the 1-hour assembly or classroom, we talk about what does depression look like? What do you do when your friends are having thoughts of suicide, when you're concerned about a parent? And after every presentation, we probably get, you know, say we're speaking to 400 students, we probably would get about, 10% or maybe 30 students coming up who now want to talk about their friends and their concerns. They want to talk about themselves and how no one knows that they think about suicide every day. So these are the students who are now getting help because we surround them with love, we surround them with resources. But because I'm on that stage and I'm willing to talk openly and honestly about it, the students just come forward because they now believe that it's okay and they don't have to do this alone.
Okay.
So I encourage schools and communities to say, if we don't talk about it, we can't change it. And the students, about 20% will have some type of suicidal thought sometime in their high school career. So students are already thinking about it. They know of friends. if I just spoke to a group of 200 7th graders in one of the schools, and when I asked, how many of you know someone who's had thoughts or talked about it or have a concern about someone or yourself, and I would guess about 90% of them raised their hand in grade 7.
Goodness.
And I said, how many of you had someone talk to you about this? Almost all of their hands went down. So the students are hearing about it, they're concerned about friends, and they're carrying this weight on their shoulders.
Right.
Because the adults don't want to talk about it. It's taboo. And it's okay when people have thoughts of suicide. They don't have to feel that way. It's not uncommon, but there is hope for it.
Well, Barb, we only have a few minutes, and I really want to give you the opportunity to share with our viewers what you're able to do in the Great Lakes Bay region, or what are you doing in the Great Lakes Bay region?
We're actually doing a lot of really good work. We are doing evidence-based and best practice trainings. So we're doing ASSIST, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills. We're doing Yellow Ribbon, Safe Talk. We're in almost every high school, middle school, training staff.
Okay.
We have a quite substantial grant. We also received a grant from Dow, and we are going to be teaching and training the next generation of healthcare providers. So we're integrating health and behavioral health in the Great Lakes Bay region. We do a walk August 12th this year at Northwood University. Last year we had 1,100 people, and this year we anticipate 1,100 to 1,500 people to come together to bring awareness, and they can check in with that as well with us about the work that we're doing.
Okay.
We also have an ongoing support group, so we meet twice a month, and that is free of charge for anyone who is a survivor of suicide loss.
Okay.
And
okay.
2 numbers I'd like your audience to be aware of is there's a 1-800-273-TALK and a text line, 741-741, and I think that'll be on the prompt, that if you're concerned about someone or yourself, you can contact 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and either one of these numbers will connect you to resources and spend time talking to you on how to help yourself or someone else.
Okay. Well, Barb, I can only give you maybe around 15 seconds. I know that you have a book.
Yes.
If you could just share with us the title of the book and just a little bit in around 30 seconds time of what the book consists of.
Sure. The book is called I'm Possible Project. It's a book of short stories, and each story is about 500 words or less. My story is called Pain with a Purpose, and it is to inspire people to take your life challenges and to do something positive to change the world and to affect others in a positive way. So my story is about my brother's suicide and what I have done to survive it and to make change. So it's called Pain with a Purpose, and the book is I'm Possible.
Okay. Well, Barb, I really want to thank you so much for being on Public
You're
Report
welcome.
today, sharing with our viewers a topic that's sometimes very difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy for the success that you're having in being able to help families and just bring this subject to the mainstream and helping to protect our kids. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'll be right back.